Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the She Means Business podcast. As we get close to wrapping up the year, it's a perfect time to reflect on balance, connection, and the choices that shape the lives we want to lead. Today, we're bringing back one of our most talked about episodes, a conversation that resonated deeply because it tackles a topic we don't often talk about and not nearly enough. Our guest, Megan Anderson, Global Client Director at Microsoft, shares her journey of balancing work and motherhood in a way that's raw, real, and incredibly inspiring. Megan opens up about her experience of being hired while pregnant, a moment that underscores the importance of supportive company cultures and breaking the stigma around working mothers. She offers thoughtful advice on letting go of guilt and challenging the societal pressures that so often weigh on women. If you missed this episode the first time, or if you want a refresher on the wisdom she shared, you're in for a treat. I know I certainly need to hear it again. So with that said, here it is. Have a listen. Hi, I'm Gail Bannock.
And I'm Alana Santone. Welcome to the She Means Business podcast. Throughout our careers, we faced countless questions and sought advice from other women we respect and admire. And that's exactly what this show is about.
Each week, we aim to help you achieve your goals by sharing our experiences and talking with successful leaders, offering real stories, practical advice, and actionable takeaways for women who mean business. All right, let's do this.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our chat with Megan Anderson on the She Means Business podcast. Megan is currently a global client director at Microsoft, but she's had a career that has spanned musical theater, consulting, and then various leadership roles in high-growth, venture-backed tech companies. She's also a guest lecturer, angel investor advisor, and a mom. So, Megan, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the fact that you took your most recent job while pregnant, something we don't hear a lot about in the industry, and in such a senior role. Tell us about how that happened.
Everybody jokes at Microsoft that, joke was on them because I actually interviewed them. I met like 25 people. I'm a big one for like really understanding the people and culture before I jump in. So I met a ton of people basically all through my first trimester and got the job officially at, I guess I would have been almost 3 months pregnant and then started like 3.5, 4 months pregnant. I didn't tell people, when I was meeting them, I didn't tell everybody. A couple of people I did tell when I was super, super early, but I did tell them before I, officially got the job and signed and everything that I was pregnant. And the reason I did is because I see the interview process for any new job as a two-sided interview. They're interviewing me. I'm also interviewing them. And for me, I wanted to make sure their reaction to my news that I was pregnant was really important to me. Like this is where the rubber hits the road on values and culture. You guys have told me so many things about the values and culture of Microsoft. Am I going to see that be true in this moment? And I absolutely did. Again, not just from the hiring manager who was hiring me, but their boss and their boss's boss. Like everyone just reacted so favorably. And I think that was, just a true reflection of the culture. But I think this is where it comes in, like the first and foremost, you need to make sure you're opting into a culture that is going to support you and that you want to be part of. That's one thing. And then I think the other piece of this story that is so important is what's going on at home. Because first trimester, I was really, really, really sick. I was with my first as well. And I would not have been able to show up for these interviews and kill the interview if I didn't have my husband doing all the other things that need to be done for our 3.5-year-old. Because I would do these interviews and then I would crash. And I had another job at the time. And so I really, in this time of our life, I pretty much did nothing around the house. I didn't do a ton with our 3.5-year-old. Like my husband totally took the lead on all of those things. And we also had family helping. And so, I think there is this myth that rock star women are able to have it all and do it all. I just like fundamentally don't think that's true. I was like, in other domains of my life, I was doing nothing while I was working hard to get this job.
Can you tell us, like, actually, what did you say? Like, because what you just described actually sounds impossible. I have never done it. I don't really know anybody else who is success other than the CEO of Yahoo. I mean, you hear about these anomaly unicorns. So you're a unicorn. So, like, what did you actually say? How did that go down?
So the first person I told was the hiring manager. It was when he was like formally offering me the job, and I had rehearsed this, and I said, Sean, I have to tell you something. I am pregnant. He was kind of like, oh, okay, congratulations. You know, it wasn't like this totally smooth conversation. Like, the conversation itself was a little bit clunky.
So was this before, or like, did he give you the offer? Like, timing? When did he give you the offer and you're like, I'm pregnant, and then sign?
This is where strategy came in. And again, I think different people can play this differently, but I had already negotiated salary. Like, I had already negotiated the key pieces of the offer, because I didn't want any unconscious or conscious bias to seep into that process. So I had already negotiated the details of the offer, but we were to the point where it was like, okay, here's what I was able to do for you. Here's our final offer, kind of thing. And I had seen the offer right before this conversation as well. And I knew I was good with the offer. Like, this was the offer I wanted it to be. And then I told him I was pregnant in that conversation. And actually, I did preamble with Sean, I have some news. And I'm telling you this because it's really important to me that we start our working relationship from a place of transparency. And I want to feel like you have all the facts, and I also want to feel supported by you. So I did tell him why I was telling him kind of what I was about to tell him. And then I just told him. And again, he was, I think, surprised in that moment that I was telling him, but then he was also kind of like, I'm also not surprised. You kind of dropped some hints through the interview process. Congratulations. We're all so happy for you. And we'll figure out the details.
I actually had my two kids 13 months apart. So I found out I was pregnant while I was on maternity leave, because I had to go back to be able to get my maternity leave benefits again. And I made an appointment to see my VP at the time. And I was so nervous to tell her that I was pregnant. And I was at the time probably 2 months pregnant. And I said, do this whole preamble, like, you know, I'm so sorry. I don't want to let you down, whatever. And I said, I'm pregnant. And that moment when you say it, and it's like the moment of truth, like, how will they react? And she said, oh my God, I'm so relieved. I thought you were going to quit. And at that moment, I knew that the company I was at was the company that was right for me, because they had my back. And not only that, they were going to help me facilitate through this process that is so hard for so many. And this was 18 and a half years ago. So, you know, flash forward to this time where values play such a huge part in the interview process, and companies are so much more focused on values than they were 20 years ago. It's just such an interesting way to approach it, which is to say, like, listen, if they don't react well to my news, then it's probably not the company for 100%. Me going forward. And were you relieved when at the reaction?
I was relieved, because I think these moments are always a bit nerve-wracking, but I did expect it, because I had asked a lot of questions about the culture, and I had talked to another woman who wasn't part of my hiring loop, but she's a very senior woman in Microsoft Canada. I was able to suss out how the broader culture was going to treat this. And then also just looking at the details of the actual parental leave program, I think also says a lot about how a company handles these situations. Do they top up? How long do they top up for? Microsoft has a super generous program. And so when you see that they're also following through on like where they put hard dollars, like also a pretty good sign.
It really is nerve-wracking. I did the same thing 3 times, and I remember every conversation, and it is so scary, and you never actually know how it's going to go. And now that I think of it, all 3 of my confessions were to men. I had male bosses at the time. And not that I think it's better or worse. They were actually all wonderful. but it is really, really scary. I want to go back to something that you said as you were declaring your situation. You said, I want to start this with, being honest. And there's something problematic about the way that we do share information in our culture where it's at 3 months. Arguably, you've known for 2 months. And I don't know how you felt, but I felt like such a fraud that I've been actively lying and hiding for 2 months, which is a really long time. And so I felt so rotten. By the time I came to tell them, I felt so dishonest, and there's no other way to do it. I mean, you can tell people earlier, but that's really scary too. And so how do you manage that? And then in the same breath say, I'm coming to you with full transparency after I've been non-transparent for the last 2 months. How do you deal with that? Because I found it really hard.
Yeah. So I do think this is actually where my support network comes in, because the reality is I really wish we lived in a world where we didn't feel apologetic about when we biologically we have to have kids if we're going to have kids. Like, we are the one who has to do it. The whole situation is just kind of shitty, to be honest. There's a lot of societal pressure. And so I wish I could magic wand all that away, but I can't, right? All these things are true. And so I think first and foremost, it's having a group of girlfriends mostly who were very vocal with me about you have nothing to apologize about. You have they were my hype people, and having those hype people in your corner, I think is super important, because there's so much about the early days that feel a bit shitty. Because at the end of the day, I do think the mindset we should be adopting when we're having these conversations is that it is my choice to decide when and how I communicate this news. I could tell people at 2 months. I could tell people at 5 months. I get this is my choice and my right to handle this how I want to handle it. These conversations are hard. And I decided to tell before I took the job. I don't think women have to. I don't think you owe the company that's about to hire you anything.
Did you ever have the thought while you were either early pregnant, or because it sounds like it was a relatively long process, but while you were thinking of getting pregnant, trying to get pregnant, that this is not the right time for me to leave and start a new job? Because I feel like a lot of women have that thought.
Yes, I definitely had the thought. I'm a huge believer in the Sheryl Sandberg advice, don't leave before you leave. Huge believer in there is no right time ever. You cannot plan these things. And if career is important to you, and if you're an ambitious person, you keep your foot on the gas until the day you've decided your maternity leave starts. And whether that means putting your hand up for a promotion, getting another job, because who knows, fertility is so hard to predict too. So I have known friends who have said, well, I'll go for that promotion after I have my next kid. And then they have trouble having their next kid. And before you know it, it's 5 years later and you still haven't put up your hand for a promotion, because then toddlers are tough. There's never a perfect 100%. Time. So don't leave before you leave.
I've heard a lot of women early in their career to say, you can't do both. You can't have it all. You can't have the career and have pregnancies and have more than one kid or not have any kids. Can women have kids and be uber successful? I mean, obviously you're an example of that. Do you believe that's a thing?
100%.
And what do you say to young women starting off and the young men who support them?
You absolutely can have both, but I agree that you can't have it all. You absolutely have to prioritize. I think just tactically, one, making sure that your priorities and values are super clear to you, and that they're super clear in your household. You've talked to your partner about these things. Okay, what do we value and prioritize for our family right now? And what does that mean for the roles that both of us are going to play? And either, there's a lot to do on the home front. One of the two of you has to do it, or you have to hire someone to do it. These things need to get done. And so having really deliberate conversations about how you're going to both prioritize your time and what you're going to outsource. I mean, every study in the world shows us that it defaults to the woman. In my case, my husband does 90% of drop off and pickup. He does 100% of the cooking. He absolutely does more on the home front than I do. And that's a really deliberate choice that we've made. Another equally as good choice would have been to hire a nanny. Like there's different choices you can make, but you've got to make them deliberately. Right. I'd say like, don't underestimate the support system that you have to architect for yourself at home. And for some people, that's grandparents. The other thing I think you really need are sponsors at work. You need people who are advocating on your behalf when you are not in the room. And that to me is a really key difference between mentors and sponsors. Mentors are great. They can help you through some tough moments and help you build skills, but sponsors advocate for you when you're not in the room. And whether you take 6 weeks of maternity leave for a year and a half, there's a big stretch of time there where you're not in the room and you need someone advocating on your behalf. So I think you can absolutely achieve both, but you just have to be really deliberate about how you craft your home life and how you craft your work life. You also have to decide what you're okay with deprioritizing. Our house is not perfectly decorated and it's certainly not tidy all the time. I'm not the person who has perfect nails and hair and plucked eyebrows. And a bunch of these things sound super frivolous, but I think we as women tend to add up all these pressures on ourselves. Whereas, if you're like, well, no, actually what's really important to me is I'm ambitious and I want to go hard at my career and I want to have daily quality time with my kid and my partner. And those are the two rocks and everything else is allowed to drop. Then that actually becomes doable because you've taken out the house, you've taken out the nails, you've taken out the whatever.
I really, really love that, Megan. And I remember at one point I was feeling guilty because I asked my nanny to do bath time. And some woman, that I was talking to, some friend said, "Oh, I love bath time and it's so great." And then I felt guilty. And then I went home and I said, no, I'll do bath time. And then I did bath time. And you know what? Bath time was not that great. It was hard and it was yelly and then I had to get them out and it was messy and it wasn't special and it wasn't delightful and it wasn't magical. And I was like, you know what? I don't want bath time. Bath time's not that great. I delegated bath time again to my nanny. And I said, you know what? I'll take book bedtime and we are going to start a new tradition called talking about things. And I have this thing with my kids where every night we sit in bed and we talk about things and I hear about their day. And it's great for having intimate conversations and teaching them about sex and space and whatever we want to talk about. But when I hear you say you can't have it all, that's what I hear. Like you said, there's the rocks of the big things, but they're made up of these little things that you can say, you know what? No, I don't want to cook. Some people want to cook with their kids. I don't want to cook with my kids. I just want to eat with my kids. I'm going to sit around the table and we have dinner every night, but I didn't cook it and I didn't do bath time and that's okay. And so I think it's made up of those little decisions that you can let go of some things, forgive yourself, everything from the manicure to the bath time routine to the pickup. Who cares who picks up? Like it's not, so I love that you said that.
These micro decisions are, they add up to a lot. Like it's taking out drop off and pickup. Your bath time story is very similar to drop off and pickup. I remember I was in a frenzy one day trying to do drop off and then get to the office. And my husband, who works from home, was like, I don't understand why you whip yourself into such a frenzy. I am very happy to do both drop off and pickup. I work from home. I'm not trying to shoot downtown. And I was like, yeah, but what kind of a mother will I be if I don't do dry? And he's like, and he just kind of asked me like, what do you think is underneath that? Like what you just, do some thinking about that. Maybe talk to your therapist about it. If we're holding these assumptions or beliefs about these moments in a day that are really important to us, is it because they're actually truly important to us or our kid or our boss? Or is there actually just a bunch of our own bias and societal pressure kind of baked into this? It's
funny that you say that because I have the benefit of now having a 19 and an 18-year-old. And it's so interesting because as I look back, and I often say this to women who are starting out in their careers or starting out in this motherhood journey, is as I look back, none of those things in isolation mean anything. My kids don't remember that I did bath time or I didn't. I don't even remember if I did or didn't. Or the story time or like whatever the traditions you had, what they remember is the feelings they had as they grew up. and what they learned from you? And were you there when they needed you? And the feelings of safety and comfort and love. And that's what you're really, your job is to get your kids to adulthood and to have a wonderful relationship. And how you get there are just a pathway of small choices. And I see that now, but I have I have the luxury of wisdom from like 18 years of these struggles as I went, where I was like, oh my God, I missed the concert, or I couldn't get to that track meet at noon because it's up north and I work down south. Like all of these things where I see other people doing it and that pressure you feel. And now I'm here and I'm like, oh, I just have a great relationship with my kids. And that's the outcome you're looking for, even though those little things feel so important. So Megan, I did want to ask you one last question. What advice would you give your younger self starting out in your career?
I think that there's themes that have come up, like don't leave before you leave, pick the people you work with strategically. But if I had to choose one that we haven't actually talked about yet, it's don't apologize. I think we spend so much time as women apologizing, whether it's, oh, sorry, gotta pop out early today to pick up my kids, or, oh, sorry, I'm pregnant. I look at my peers who are men and they just don't do that. Like if they have to go pick up their kids, they just do it. They don't talk about it or apologize for it. Like they just go pick up their freaking kids. And I think they have it right. And so I'm not even going to try to get into the nature and nurture of what makes us apologetic, but I want women to apologize less.
That's great. Thank you so much for coming on, for sharing your story and your wisdom. And there's so many good things to grab onto from this conversation. So thanks so much for being here, Megan.
Oh, it was a real pleasure.
Thank you so much. There was so much there. There's so much there. I could just talk to her for another hour.
I agree.
I don't even know where to start. I'm so grateful that she was willing to talk about, that experience of like I said, like a unicorn experience of getting a job, an impressive job while pregnant, how she navigated. I just remember those conversations are so scary when you're in the job.
Right.
And you know the people and you have job security and you have a sign and they can't fire you, and to have the courage to have that conversation and it work out. I'm just really grateful that she was willing to share that.
I agree. And I was thinking to myself, I have a little bit of PTSD listening to her talk because I remember those days so vividly. I mean, my kids are a bit older, but thinking back to the times where I had to tell. And that story about, when I was pregnant already and going back and this lost sleep for weeks. Oh my God, what am I? And the relief I felt when I was supported and the fact that it was actually a question on whether I'd be supported or not. And the privilege I've had of being supported by, I think that notion of I loved what she said about sponsors and support structures outside and the difference between sponsors and mentors. And I had true sponsors through my career that made sure that as I was navigating it through pregnancies and leaves, my career progressed. And I think if that's one thing our listeners take away is that importance of sponsors. It's not don't do it. Absolutely, but do it with intention. I think Megan was really good at talking about that notion of intention, being deliberate, surrounding yourself both personally and professionally with people who advocate and who speak on your behalf, who support you through. Just so many great lessons. And I think actually it'll be good to do a part 2 with Megan in, post baby as she's thinking about going back to work and how she's navigating that part. But the structure that she's put in place to be able to kind of have both, not all, but both is really a great lesson there.
Yeah. I think this idea of, having it all and having and the importance of a partner. I mean, we seem to be quoting Sheryl Sandberg quite a bit lately, but one of her other principles is, the biggest career decision that you are going to make is the partner that you choose in life.
It's a great lesson.
And so, you don't often think about that when you're dating and you're looking for somebody, but, it needs to be one of the things that you think about when you are looking for who you're going to spend your life with. And do they share the same values? Are they going to support you? Are they a real partner in everything from liking to travel and liking the same movies to, are they going to wake up in the middle of the night? Are they going to support you going back to work early? Are they, to do drop off and pick up? Like, it's just, this is real life. And if you don't have somebody who is willing to do that, but you love them anyway, then understand that is going to impact the things that you can do, because you can't. I mean, we had to outsource. We had to get a great nanny, and we had to pay for it because we couldn't do it all, and we didn't have the built-in family support.
And I just add to that, whether you have a partner or not. And then there's a lot of women now or men who are having babies on their own. And I think that notion of whoever you're choosing to put in your life, whether it's a partner, whether it's a support system, whether it's an outsourcing, this notion of, I can't stress enough how much I love that quote of you can have both, but you can't have it all. It's just such an important takeaway. So whether you have a partner that is supporting you in that, or you have a support system, or you have a broader network, or you outsource, that notion of you must put that architecture and the structures around yourself to be able to be successful is super critical.
I agree. And I think the choosing what you're going to let go of, 100%. That's so important to me. That
resonates.
Yeah. Right. I mean, it's just, and then you have to manage. And when I say manage, I mean, get rid of the guilt that is associated with it, because that comes with it. So you can't be at every recital, and you can't be at every game, and that's okay. And you can't be at every bath time, and you can't be at every bedtime.
Yep.
If you travel, you're going to miss some days. And when you raise somebody for 18 years and you travel a few times a year for 3 days, it's not the end of the world.
Correct.
And women oftentimes are very worried about, I'm not going to be there, and then the relationship's not going to be the same, and they're not going to forgive me. And we have to let that shit go, because just let it go.
Let it go.
Let it go. Thanks for listening to this episode of She Means Business. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts, and head over to our show notes where you can find helpful links and summaries of key points from the episode. We'd also love to hear from you on LinkedIn or Instagram, so please follow and DM us at the She Means Business podcast. See you next time.